It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Oak Ridge, a small city known for its peaceful streets and friendly neighborhoods. The sun was shining brightly, and life seemed normal for most people. But for Sarah Thompson, the day would take a terrifying turn that she would never forget. Sarah, a 22-year-old college student, was the daughter of Mayor Robert Thompson. She had just finished lunch with her friends at a cozy cafe downtown. As she drove home in her silver sedan, she felt relaxed, humming along to her favorite song on the radio. At a red light near the edge of town, she noticed flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. Confused, she pulled over to the side of the road, thinking maybe she had accidentally broken a traffic rule. Out of the police car stepped Officer Mark Davis, a tall man with a stern expression. He had been on the force for over 15 years and was known for his tough attitude. Instead of calmly approaching Sarah's car like most officers would, he marched toward her with an aggressive stride. His boots thudded heavily against the pavement, and his hand rested on the grip of his gun. Sarah rolled down her window and smiled nervously. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. But Officer Davis didn't respond kindly. Without checking her license or registration, he snapped, "Get out of the car right now." His voice was sharp and commanding, startling Sarah. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what she had done wrong. "Can you please tell me why I'm being stopped?" she asked softly, trying to stay calm. That question seemed to enrage Officer Davis even more. Witnesses later said they could see the anger building in his face. He leaned closer to the window, glaring at Sarah. Then, in a move that shocked everyone who saw it, he yanked open the car door and shouted, "I said get out." His tone was so loud and threatening that Sarah flinched. What happened next left Sarah frozen in fear. Officer Davis reached for his gun, pulling it out of its holster and pointing it directly at her head. "Don't make me repeat myself," he growled. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she slowly stepped out of the car, her hands raised in surrender. Her heart pounded in her chest as she wondered if this was how her life would end. All because of a routine traffic stop. Unbeknownst to Officer Davis, a young man named Kevin Parker was sitting in his car nearby, waiting for his girlfriend to finish shopping. When he saw the commotion, he instinctively grabbed his phone and started recording. Through the camera lens, he captured every moment. The way Officer Davis screamed at Sarah, the fear in her eyes, and the gun pointed inches away from her face. Kevin couldn't believe what he was witnessing. When the video ended, Kevin uploaded it to social media, adding a caption, "This is happening right now in Oak Ridge. Is this really how our police treat innocent citizens?" Within minutes, the clip went viral. People across the city, and soon the entire country, were watching, in disbelief. Comments flooded in, expressing outrage and demanding answers. How could a police officer act so violently towards someone who clearly posed no threat? And why was he treating the mayor's daughter this way? As news of the incident spread, shockwaves rippled through Oak Ridge. Many residents were horrified by what they saw. Some shared their own stories of encounters with Officer Davis, claiming he often targeted minorities during traffic stops. Others criticized the lack of accountability within the police department, accusing them of ignoring complaints about Davis's behavior for years. For Sarah, the experience was traumatizing. She sat in her room that night, replaying the events in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of the gun aimed at her head or the sound of Officer Davis's angry voice. Her father, Mayor Thompson, tried to comfort her, but even he was struggling to process what had happened. "No one should ever feel unsafe around law enforcement," he told her firmly. "We're going to fix this." Little did anyone know, this single incident would ignite a firestorm of protests, investigations, and calls for reform. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about exposing deep-rooted issues within the system and ensuring that justice prevailed. But as the days passed, it became clear that achieving justice wouldn't be easy. The battle was only beginning and the whole world was watching. The next morning, Oak Ridge woke up to chaos. The video of Officer Mark Davis pointing a gun at Sarah Thompson had spread like wildfire overnight. By sunrise, it was everywhere. On television, social media platforms, and even national news outlets. People couldn't stop talking about it. What started as a local incident quickly turned into a nationwide conversation about police brutality, racial bias, and accountability. Mayor Robert Thompson sat in his office, staring blankly at the wall. He hadn't slept all night. The thought of his daughter being treated like a criminal, and worse, having a gun pointed at her head, made him sick to his stomach. As the mayor of Oak Ridge, he had always prided himself on promoting fairness and equality, but now he felt like a failure. How could something so horrifying happen under his watch? And how many other families had suffered silently because they didn't have the power or platform to speak out? Robert knew he had to act fast. He called an emergency press conference for later that day. Reporters from across the region gathered outside City Hall, eager to hear what the mayor had to say. When Robert stepped onto the podium, his face was grim but determined. Standing beside him was Sarah, her eyes red from crying but her posture strong. She held her father's hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. "This is not just an attack on my family," Robert began, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "This is an attack on every citizen of this city, who deserves to feel safe and respected by those in uniform. No one, absolutely no one, should live in fear of the people sworn to protect them." Sarah then spoke briefly, her voice trembling but clear. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "I was just driving home after lunch with my friends. I never imagined I'd be treated like this, like I was some kind of danger." Her words struck a chord with everyone listening. Many viewers wiped away tears as they watched her recount the terrifying moment when Officer Davis pulled his gun on her. The press conference ended with a promise from Mayor Thompson. There would be a full investigation into the incident, and anyone found guilty would face justice. But the public wasn't willing to wait patiently. That evening, hundreds of residents gathered outside the Oak Ridge Police Department headquarters, holding signs that read, "Justice for Sarah" and "Reform Now." Protesters chanted slogans like, "No justice, no peace," and "Accountability starts here." Among the crowd were activists and community leaders who had long criticized the police department for its lack of transparency. They demanded immediate action, not just against Officer Davis, but also against the system that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. One activist named Maria Gonzalez took the microphone and addressed the crowd. "We've been telling you for years that officers like Mark Davis are a problem," she said passionately. "They abuse their power, target minorities, and get away with it because nobody holds them accountable. Enough is enough." Meanwhile, journalists dug deeper into Officer Davis's past. What they uncovered shocked even the most cynical critics. Over the last decade, multiple complaints had been filed against him for racial profiling, excessive force, and verbal abuse. Yet none of these complaints resulted in disciplinary action. In fact, internal reviews often dismissed them as unfounded or minor misunderstandings. This pattern of ignoring misconduct only fueled public anger. One particularly troubling case involved a young black man named Jamal Carter, who claimed Officer Davis had stopped him 3 times in 1 month for no reason other than driving while black. Each time, Jamal said, Davis used aggressive language and searched his car without probable cause. Though Jamal filed a formal complaint, nothing came of it. When reporters tracked him down, he agreed to share his story publicly, adding fuel to the growing fire. As the days passed, pressure mounted on the district attorney's office to take action. Protesters marched daily, blocking traffic and chanting for justice. Social media played a crucial role too, with hashtags like Justice for Sarah and Reform Oak Ridge PD trending nationwide. Celebrities and influencers joined the movement, amplifying the message and keeping the issue in the spotlight. Finally, after weeks of relentless protests and media coverage, the district attorney announced that charges would be filed against Officer Davis. The decision sent shockwaves through the community. While some praised the move as a step toward accountability, others argued that the charges weren't severe enough. Still, it was undeniable that this marked a turning point, a rare instance where a police officer faced consequences for misconduct. Inside the police department, tensions ran high. Officers whispered nervously about whether Davis's arrest signaled the beginning of a crackdown on misconduct. Some defended him, claiming he was simply following protocol, while others admitted privately that they had witnessed his aggressive behavior firsthand. Chief Alan Peterson, the head of the department, issued a statement promising reforms, including mandatory training on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. However, many residents remained skeptical, questioning whether these promises would lead to real change. For Sarah and her family, the fight was far from over. Despite the charges against Davis, they knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Every day brought new reminders of the trauma Sarah had endured, the constant media attention, the hateful comments online, and the lingering fear whenever she saw a police car. But she refused to let it break her. With her father's support, she began attending rallies and speaking out about her experience, determined to turn her pain into purpose. As the weeks went by, the protests continued, growing larger and louder. Activists pushed for broader reforms, calling for independent oversight boards, stricter hiring standards, and greater transparency in police operations. Local schools organized discussions about systemic racism, encouraging students to think critically about privilege and power. Even businesses got involved, donating funds to organizations working toward criminal justice reform. Through it all, Sarah became a symbol of resilience. Her courage inspired countless others to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment by law enforcement. Together, they formed a coalition demanding meaningful change, not just in Oak Ridge, but across the country. For the first time in years, it felt like real progress might be possible. But as hopeful as things seemed, challenges lay ahead. Would the charges against Officer Davis stick? Could the police department truly reform itself? And most importantly, would Sarah ever feel safe again? These questions weighed heavily on everyone's minds as the city prepared for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The courtroom was packed to the brim on the first day of Officer Mark Davis's trial. Reporters lined the walls, their notepads ready and cameras rolling. Citizens filled every available seat, some wearing t-shirts with Sarah Thompson's face, printed on them alongside slogans like "Justice for All." Outside, protesters held banners high, chanting for accountability as police officers worked to keep the crowd under control. It was clear that this case wasn't just about one man, it was a symbol of something much bigger. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Judge Linda Harper, a no-nonsense woman known for her fairness, presided over the proceedings. She reminded everyone present that the court expected decorum and respect, but it was hard to ignore the gravity of what was unfolding. Officer Davis sat at the defendant's table, his expression unreadable. Beside him, his defense attorney whispered instructions into his ear. Across the aisle, Sarah Thompson and her family occupied the front row, their faces etched with determination. Prosecutor Rachel Martinez opened the case with a powerful statement. Standing tall in her navy blue suit, she addressed the jury directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and commanding, "this is not just about one officer or one incident. This is about trust. Trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. When an officer abuses their power, it erodes that trust. And when that abuse is fueled by racial bias, it tears apart the very fabric of our society." Martinez then played the viral video for the jury. Gasps echoed through the room as everyone watched Officer Davis scream at Sarah, pull out his gun and point it inches from her head. Even those who had seen the clip countless times couldn't help but feel its impact. Martinez paused after the video ended, letting the silence speak for itself before continuing. This young woman did nothing wrong. She was unarmed, compliant, and terrified. Yet Officer Davis treated her like a criminal simply because of the color of her skin. That is unacceptable. When it was time for the defense to respond, Davis's lawyer, James Caldwell, wasted no time trying to shift the narrative. He portrayed his client as a dedicated officer doing his job in a high-pressure situation. Officer Davis has served this city for over 15 years, Caldwell argued. He's faced dangerous situations where split-second decisions were necessary to protect lives. Yes, he may have acted aggressively, but that aggression stems from years of experience dealing with real threats. Caldwell's words didn't sit well with many in the courtroom. Some jurors exchanged skeptical glances, while others scribbled notes furiously. The prosecutor quickly countered during cross-examination, presenting evidence that undermined Caldwell's claims. One key piece came from internal records showing multiple complaints filed against Davis over the years. Each complaint detailed similar patterns of behavior: excessive force, racial profiling, and verbal abuse. None of these cases had resulted in discipline, which prosecutors argued created a culture of impunity within the department. One of the most impactful testimonies came from Jamal Carter, the young black man who had been stopped repeatedly by Davis without cause. Dressed neatly in a button-down shirt, Jamal took the stand with quiet confidence. Under questioning, he described how Davis would often accuse him of suspicious activity despite having no evidence. He'd say things like, "You don't belong here," Jamal recalled. Then he'd search my car, throw my belongings around, and leave without apologizing. It made me feel worthless, like I wasn't human. Jamal's testimony struck a chord with the jury. Several members nodded sympathetically as he spoke, their expressions softening. Later, Maria Gonzalez, the activist who had spoken at the protests, also testified. She talked about systemic racism within policing institutions and how officers like Davis perpetuated cycles of fear and mistrust. Her passionate delivery brought murmurs of agreement from the gallery. Throughout the trial, Sarah remained composed, though it was clear the process was emotionally draining. When called to testify, she recounted the events of that fateful afternoon in vivid detail. Her voice wavered at times, especially when describing the moment Davis drew his weapon. But she never faltered, maintaining eye contact with the jury as she spoke. "I thought I was going to die," she admitted, her hands gripping the railing of the witness stand. "For what? For being black? For being someone's daughter? I don't know. But I do know that no one should ever feel the way I felt that day." Her testimony left the courtroom silent. Even the judge paused briefly before moving on to the next witness. By the end of the day, it was evident that Sarah's courage had resonated deeply, not just with the jury, but with everyone watching. As the days turned into weeks, more witnesses took the stand, painting a damning picture of Officer Davis's conduct. Former colleagues revealed that Davis frequently made racially insensitive remarks during shifts, referring to minorities using derogatory terms. One officer even claimed that Davis bragged about targeting certain neighborhoods because those people always have something to hide. These revelations further damaged Davis's credibility, making it harder for his defense team to argue innocence. Outside the courthouse, public interest remained sky-high. Protesters continued their demonstrations daily, holding signs that read, "Accountability saves lives," and "Justice delayed is justice denied." Local businesses showed support by displaying flyers in their windows urging reform. Even national figures weighed in, praising Sarah's bravery and calling for systemic changes in policing. By the time closing arguments arrived, emotions ran high. Prosecutor Martinez delivered a stirring speech, reminding the jury of the weight of their decision. "You hold the power to send a message," she said. "A message that says we will not tolerate abuse of authority. A message that says justice must be blind to race, class, and privilege. Let your verdict reflect the values we all want to see in our society." In contrast, Caldwell appealed to the jury's sense of fairness, urging them to consider the pressures faced by police officers. "We're asking you to look beyond the headlines and focus on the facts," he pleaded. "Mark Davis is not perfect, but he deserves a fair judgment based on evidence, not emotion." When Judge Harper dismissed the jury to deliberate, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew the outcome would have far-reaching implications, not just for Davis and Sarah, but for the future of policing in Oak Ridge and beyond. As the deliberations stretched into hours, the tension outside grew palpable. Protesters lit candles, sang songs, and prayed for justice. Inside, Sarah clutched her father's hand tightly, steeling herself for whatever came next. No matter the verdict, one thing was certain. The trial had already changed the conversation. People were talking about issues they had ignored for too long, issues of bias, accountability, and reform. Whether justice would prevail remained to be seen, But hope lingered in the air, fragile yet unyielding. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as the jury returned after nearly 2 days of deliberation. Everyone leaned forward in their seats, holding their breath. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself could crack under its weight. Judge Linda Harper instructed the foreperson to deliver the verdict, her voice steady but firm. For a moment there was complete silence, then came the words that would change everything. "Guilty on all counts," the foreperson announced, her voice echoing through the room. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by murmurs of disbelief, relief, and triumph. Tears streamed down Sarah Thompson's face as she clutched her father's hand tightly. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, whispering words of comfort. Across the aisle, Officer Mark Davis sat motionless, his expression blank. His lawyer whispered something into his ear, but Davis didn't react. It was over. He had been found guilty. The crowd erupted into applause, though. Judge Harper quickly called for order. "This is a court of law," she reminded everyone sternly. But even she couldn't hide the faintest trace of satisfaction in her tone as she addressed the defendant. Turning to Davis, she said, "Officer Davis, your actions were reckless, unjustified, and deeply damaging to public trust. You abused your authority and instilled fear where safety should have existed. For this, you will be held accountable." With those words, Judge Harper sentenced Davis to 2 years in prison, along with mandatory counseling on racial sensitivity and de-escalation techniques once he was released. While some felt the sentence was too lenient given the severity of his crime, others saw it as a groundbreaking victory. Rarely had a police officer faced such consequences for misconduct, especially when racial bias was involved. In Oak Ridge, this moment became symbolic, a rare instance where accountability won out over impunity. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted as news of the verdict spread. Protesters who had camped out for days broke into song, singing civil rights anthems like "We Shall Overcome." Others hugged strangers, celebrating what they saw as a step toward justice. Reporters scrambled to capture reactions, thrusting microphones at anyone willing to speak. One protester named Lisa Bennett, holding a sign that read "No Justice, No Peace," summed up the mood perfectly. "Today we celebrate. Tomorrow, we keep fighting." Mayor Robert Thompson addressed the crowd shortly afterward, standing beside Sarah, who looked exhausted but resolute. "This verdict doesn't erase what happened to my daughter," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But it does send a message that no one, not even those in uniform, is above the law. Today, we honor Sarah's bravery and the courage of every person who has ever stood up against injustice." For Sarah, the verdict brought a mix of emotions. Relief washed over her, knowing that Davis would face consequences for his actions. But it also stirred feelings of anger and sadness. Anger at how close she had come to losing her life, and sadness at the knowledge that countless others hadn't been as fortunate. She knew the fight wasn't over. As the cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Sarah stepped forward to speak. "I never wanted any of this," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't ask to be stopped that day, and I certainly didn't ask for a gun to be pointed at my head. But if sharing my story can help prevent this from happening to someone else, then I'll do whatever it takes. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever felt unsafe because of the color of their skin or the badge someone wears." Her words resonated deeply, earning thunderous applause from the crowd. Many wiped away tears, inspired by her strength and determination. Supporters chanted her name, holding signs aloft as she made her way back inside with her family. Despite the overwhelming support, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering trauma of that day. Nightmares still haunted her sleep, and the sight of a police car still sent shivers down her spine. Yet she refused to let fear define her. With her father's encouragement, she vowed to use her platform to advocate for meaningful change. Meanwhile, the fallout from the trial extended far beyond Oak Ridge. News outlets across the country covered the verdict extensively, framing it as a turning point in the fight for police accountability. Social media exploded with hashtags like "Accountability Wins" and "Justice for Sarah." sparking conversations about systemic racism and the need for reform. Activists seized the opportunity to push for broader changes, including stricter oversight of law enforcement agencies and greater transparency in investigations of misconduct. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers took notice. Several senators introduced legislation aimed at addressing police brutality and racial profiling, citing Sarah's case as evidence of the urgent need for action. Community leaders praised these efforts, though many cautioned that passing laws alone wouldn't solve the problem. Real change, they argued, required sustained commitment from both citizens and officials. Back in Oak Ridge, the police department faced mounting pressure to reform. Chief Alan Peterson announced sweeping changes, including the establishment of an independent oversight board to review complaints against officers. Training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques became mandatory for all personnel. Additionally, body cameras were issued to every officer, ensuring that interactions with the public were recorded and transparent. Despite these measures, skepticism remained. Some residents questioned whether the reforms went far enough, pointing out that similar promises had been made and broken in the past. Trust between the community and law enforcement had been shattered, and rebuilding it would take time. To address this, the department launched town hall meetings where citizens could voice their concerns directly to officers. These sessions were often tense, with heated debates breaking out over issues like racial profiling and excessive force. Still, they marked a small but significant step toward healing. As weeks turned into months, the impact of the trial continued to ripple outward. Schools incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curriculums, encouraging students to think critically about privilege and power. Local businesses pledged financial support to organizations working toward criminal justice reform, while artists created murals honoring victims of police violence. Even churches joined the movement, hosting prayer vigils and educational workshops to foster dialogue within the community. For Sarah and her family, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such a traumatic experience. They attended therapy sessions together, processing their emotions and finding ways to move forward. Mayor Thompson threw himself into advocacy work, partnering with local activists to push for policy changes at the state level. He often joked that he'd become the accidental activist, but his passion for reform was undeniable. Sarah, too, found her purpose. Inspired by the outpouring of support she received, she decided to pursue a career in civil rights law. She enrolled in pre-law classes at the local university, determined to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for others like her. Professors noted her dedication and resilience, qualities that would undoubtedly serve her well in her future endeavors. Though scars remained, both personal and societal, there was a sense of hope in the air. The trial had exposed deep-rooted issues within the system, but it had also shown that progress was possible. People were talking about problems they had ignored for too long, and communities were coming together to demand change. For Sarah, this gave her strength. As she told a reporter during one of her final interviews about the case, "Justice isn't perfect, but it's worth fighting for. And I'm not stopping until everyone feels safe." Little did she know, her journey was just beginning. The road ahead would be long and challenging, filled with setbacks and victories alike. But one thing was certain. Sarah Thompson had ignited a spark, one that would continue to burn brightly for years to come. The verdict in Officer Mark Davis's trial didn't just send shockwaves through Oak Ridge, it reverberated across the nation. Within days, headlines about the case dominated newspapers, television broadcasts, and social media platforms. The story of Sarah Thompson, a young woman who stood up to injustice, became a symbol of hope for marginalized communities everywhere. It wasn't long before activists, lawmakers, and ordinary citizens began drawing inspiration from her courage, sparking conversations that would lead to tangible changes. In cities far beyond Oak Ridge, protests erupted outside police departments, demanding accountability and reform. People held signs bearing Sarah's name alongside slogans like "Justice shouldn't be rare" and "End police brutality now." In New York City, thousands marched through Times Square, chanting for systemic change. In Los Angeles, demonstrators gathered near City Hall, calling for independent oversight boards similar to the one established in Oak Ridge. Even smaller towns joined the movement, organizing rallies and vigils to honor victims of police misconduct. Lawmakers took notice. Senators and representatives introduced bills aimed at increasing transparency within law enforcement agencies. One proposal called for mandatory body cameras for all officers nationwide, ensuring that interactions with the public were documented. Another sought to create a national database tracking complaints against officers, preventing those with histories of misconduct from bouncing between departments without consequence. These efforts gained bipartisan support, fueled by the growing public demand for action. Local governments also stepped up. In Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot announced sweeping reforms within the police department, including stricter hiring standards and enhanced training programs on cultural sensitivity. In Atlanta, officials allocated funds to establish community policing initiatives, encouraging officers to build relationships with residents rather than treating them as potential threats. Similar measures were adopted in dozens of other cities, each inspired by the example set in Oak Ridge. Back home, Sarah Thompson continued to play an active role in advocating for change. She traveled to neighboring states to speak at rallies and conferences, sharing her story with anyone willing to listen. Her speeches were raw and heartfelt, often bringing audiences to tears. "I'm not special," she would say. "What happened to me happens to people every single day. The only difference is that I had a voice loud enough to be heard. We need to make sure everyone has that same voice." Her message resonated deeply, particularly among young people. High school and college students organized walkouts and teach-ins, discussing issues like racial profiling, privilege, and systemic racism. Teachers incorporated these topics into their lesson plans, using Sarah's case as a real-world example of how power dynamics can perpetuate inequality. Art projects, essays, and poetry contests sprang up, giving students creative outlets to express their thoughts and frustrations. Businesses got involved too. Corporate leaders pledged financial support to organizations working toward criminal justice reform. Some companies went further, implementing diversity training programs for employees and requiring managers to undergo bias awareness workshops. Local shops displayed posters promoting unity and equality, while restaurants donated portions of their profits to grassroots movements. Even professional sports teams showed solidarity, wearing patches with messages like "Accountability Matters." During games, religious institutions played a crucial role as well. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples hosted prayer vigils and educational sessions, fostering dialogue within their congregations. Faith leaders delivered sermons emphasizing compassion, forgiveness, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Many urged their followers to get involved in advocacy work, whether by volunteering, contacting elected officials, or simply having difficult conversations with friends and family. Within Oak Ridge itself, progress was slow but steady. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board began reviewing complaints against officers, conducting thorough investigations to ensure fairness. Their first report revealed several troubling patterns, prompting additional reforms. For instance, officers found guilty of misconduct faced harsher penalties, ranging from suspension to termination. Additionally, the department implemented random audits to monitor compliance with new policies, sending a clear message that accountability was non-negotiable. Community forums became regular events, providing residents with opportunities to engage directly with law enforcement. At first, these meetings were tense, with heated debates erupting over issues like racial profiling and excessive force. Officers listened quietly as citizens shared painful stories of mistreatment, some breaking down in tears as they apologized for past wrongs. Over time, however, the tone shifted. Conversations grew more constructive, focusing on solutions rather than blame. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild. Sarah remained at the forefront of these efforts, attending nearly every forum and speaking candidly about her experiences. Her presence helped humanize the issue, reminding everyone why reform mattered. When tensions flared, she served as a calming voice, urging patience and understanding. Her ability to empathize with both sides earned her respect from residents and officers alike. Meanwhile, Officer Davis served his sentence quietly, avoiding interviews or public statements. Upon his release, he disappeared from the spotlight, entirely, retreating to a quiet life away from law enforcement. Though some argued he deserved harsher punishment, others saw his conviction as proof that the system could hold even powerful figures accountable, a rare but significant victory. As months turned into years, the impact of Sarah's case became undeniable. Crime rates dropped in areas where police-community relations improved, thanks largely to increased trust and cooperation. Studies showed that departments with robust oversight mechanisms reported fewer incidents of misconduct, suggesting that accountability led to better behavior. Meanwhile, national polls indicated growing public confidence in law enforcement, though many acknowledged there was still work to be done. For Sarah personally, the journey transformed her life in ways she never imagined. After graduating at the top of her class, she enrolled in law school, specializing in civil rights advocacy. Her professors praised her passion and determination, predicting a bright future ahead. During summer breaks, she interned at prestigious firms, gaining invaluable experience in litigation and policy reform. By the time she earned her degree, she had already secured a position at a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting racial injustice. Her family remained her biggest supporters throughout it all. Mayor Robert Thompson retired from politics, but stayed active in community initiatives, mentoring young leaders passionate about creating a better future. Together, he and Sarah co-authored a book detailing their journey, using their story to educate and inspire others. Titled Breaking the Badge, the memoir quickly became a bestseller, praised for its honesty and insight. Looking back, Sarah often reflected on how much had changed since that fateful day. The scars of trauma lingered, but so did the lessons she had learned. She realized that true justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about healing wounds, bridging divides, and building a world where everyone felt safe and valued. As she told a crowd at a rally marking the 5th anniversary of the trial, "We've come so far, but our work isn't finished. Justice isn't a destination, it's a journey, and I'm proud to be walking this path with all of you." Though challenges remained, the legacy of Sarah's bravery lived on, a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and unwavering determination. Years had passed since the trial of Officer Mark Davis, but its impact continued to shape the lives of those involved and the world around them. Oak Ridge was no longer the same city it once was. The scars of the past remained visible in subtle ways, but there was undeniable progress. Streets that had once echoed with chants of protest now hummed with the sounds of unity and collaboration. What had started as a single incident, a terrifying moment for Sarah Thompson, had grown into a movement that touched countless lives. For Sarah, life had transformed in ways she could never have predicted. After graduating from law school at the top of her class, she dedicated her career to civil rights advocacy. Her first major case involved representing a young black teenager who had been wrongfully detained by police during a traffic stop. The similarities between his story and hers were striking, and Sarah poured every ounce of her energy into ensuring justice prevailed. When the court ruled in favor of her client, awarding him compensation for emotional distress and wrongful imprisonment, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This victory wasn't just about one person, it was proof that change was possible. As word of her success spread, Sarah became a sought-after voice in legal circles. She spoke at conferences, wrote opinion pieces for national newspapers, and even appeared on television talk shows to discuss systemic issues within law enforcement. Yet despite her growing fame, she remained grounded. Every evening after long days spent fighting for justice, she returned home to a quiet apartment filled with books, photographs, and mementos from her journey. Among these treasures was a framed copy of the viral video that had sparked everything, a reminder of how far she'd come. Her family stood firmly by her side throughout it all. Mayor Robert Thompson, now retired, devoted his time to mentoring young activists eager to create meaningful change. He often joined Sarah at community events, sharing stories of their shared struggle and encouraging others to stay resilient. Together, they co-authored Breaking the Badge, a memoir chronicling their experiences. The book resonated deeply with readers, becoming required reading in schools and universities across the country. It served not only as a historical account, but also as a call to action, urging future generations to continue pushing for reform. Sarah's advocacy extended beyond the courtroom. She partnered with grassroots organizations to develop educational programs aimed at preventing police misconduct. These initiatives included workshops for officers on cultural sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and the importance of treating every individual with dignity. She also worked closely with schools to implement curriculums focused on social justice, teaching students to recognize bias and advocate for equality. Her efforts earned her numerous accolades, including a prestigious humanitarian award presented by the governor of their state. Meanwhile, Oak Ridge itself underwent remarkable transformation. The Civilian Oversight Board established in the wake of the trial had become a model for other cities seeking accountability within their police departments. Regular audits ensured compliance with new policies, while transparent reporting mechanisms allowed residents to track progress. Officers found guilty of misconduct faced swift consequences, sending a clear message that abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. Community policing initiatives flourished, fostering trust between residents and law enforcement. Officers participated in neighborhood cleanup drives, youth mentorship programs, and holiday celebrations. Slowly but surely, perceptions began to shift. While some skepticism lingered, many citizens acknowledged that relationships with the police had improved significantly. Crime rates dropped as cooperation increased, proving that mutual respect paved the way for safer communities. Nationally, the ripple effects of Sarah's case continued to inspire reform. Lawmakers passed landmark legislation requiring body cameras for all officers, creating independent oversight boards, and implementing stricter hiring standards. Activists celebrated these victories, though they cautioned against complacency. "We've made strides," Sarah reminded audiences during a keynote speech at a national summit, "but we must remain vigilant. Justice isn't something you achieve once, it's something you fight for every day." Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Some critics argued that reforms hadn't gone far enough, pointing out that racial disparities still existed in areas like sentencing and incarceration rates. Others expressed frustration over the slow pace of change, urging lawmakers to act more decisively. Sarah listened to these concerns with empathy, acknowledging that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But she refused to let setbacks dampen her resolve. If anything, they fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. On a personal level, Sarah found solace in small moments of joy. She reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and traveled whenever her schedule allowed. During one trip to Washington, D.C., she visited the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where she marveled at exhibits documenting centuries of resilience and resistance. Standing before a display honoring civil rights pioneers, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for their sacrifices and for the opportunity to carry their legacy forward. One evening, as she sat on the balcony of her apartment watching the sunset, Sarah reflected on her journey. The fear she had felt that day when Officer Davis pointed a gun at her head seemed like a lifetime ago, yet she knew it was always part of her, a reminder of why she fought so hard. Closing her eyes, she envisioned a future where no one else had to endure what she had. A future where everyone felt safe, respected, and valued. It was a dream worth striving for. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, ready to tackle another day of advocacy work. As she walked through the bustling streets of Oak Ridge, she noticed something extraordinary. People smiled at her, not because they recognized her face, but because they felt hopeful. Hopeful for a better tomorrow. Hopeful for a fairer system. Hopeful for a world where justice truly belonged to all. And as Sarah stepped into her office, Surrounded by files and notes detailing the cases she was working on, she smiled too, because she knew that every step she took brought her closer to that vision, a vision born out of pain but sustained by courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of change.